only carry the finest and more powerful things, not small blessings like yours, and sped off. One by one, powerful engines passed, but none wanted to take the responsibility of carrying the blessings to those who needed them. Finally, a small blue engine came along. It wasn't big and powerful like the other engines, but the blessings asked anyways, "Little engine, will you please pull us over the mountain?" The little engine hesitated. "I don't know if I can. I failed before. I've broken down in the past. I fell into depression before. I've been divorced before. I've been a drug addict once. I've been abused before. I've been betrayed before. I've hurt others in the past. I've been told I'm not strong enough, I'm not fast enough, I'm not good enough. And what if I start climbing and I can't make it? What if I let everyone down? What if I let everyone down again? What if I left myself down again?" The blessings on the train spoke up, "But you're here now. You have a chance to move forward, no matter what your past says. Someone needs these blessings on the other side. You may not feel capable, but you don't have to be perfect. You just have to try." The little engine took a deep breath. "I didn't know if I could make it," it said to itself, and remembered its past mistakes, its past hurts, but something inside whispered, "Be strong and courageous." So it took ownership. Everyone say ownership. Ownership. Of the challenge and said, "I think I can. I think I can. I think I can." Chugging forward, little by little, the engine pulled the train, repeating the words, "I think I can. I think I can. I think I can." The climb was steep, and the weight was heavy. The recovery climb was steep, and the healing was heavy. The forgiveness climb was steep, and the release was heavy. The sobriety climb was steep, but the discipline was heavy. The freedom climb was steep, but the shackles were heavy. But the little engine kept going. The doubts came back. The memories of the failure crept in. But instead of stopping, it pushed forward, saying, "I think I can. I think I can. I think I can." Finally, it reached the top. As it started rolling down the other side, it cheered, "I thought I could. I thought I could. I thought I could. I thought I could graduate. I thought I could start that business. I thought I could become sober. I thought I could restore my family. I thought I could be free." Because of the little engine's determination and willingness to take ownership, everyone say ownership, of the challenge, its testimony delivered the blessings, gifts, and prosperity to the other people on the other side, and bringing them joy, fulfillment, and renewed faith. A Holocaust survivor once said that everything can be taken from a man. Everything can be taken from a man, except this one thing, one's attitude in every given set of circumstances to choose one's own way. The title of this message is, "Do You Own Your Story?" The declaration we spoke earlier, "I'm blessed, I'm prosperous, I'm redeemed, I'm forgiven," so on and so forth. If you are looking at yourself in the mirror, I want to ask you all, could you say those declarations to yourself? It's one thing to say things together in a group when everyone's not looking at you, but if you're in yourself in the bathroom, just you in the mirror, nothing but your past looking back at you, could you do it? The struggle on the inside, the war of maybe I can, maybe I can't, that's the struggle of my story owning me and me owning my story. I often like to say that our lives were blessed with a finite number of pages, but an infinite number of chapters. If we look in the Bible, we see that God has ordained our life story. Psalm 139, verse 16 states that, "And in your book were written all the days that were ordained for me, when yet there was not one of them." We all have a beginning and an end date, and in this life, however, the dash in the middle is all that counts. I want to look at, if you take your attention to this whiteboard, let's just say that this circle, and don't mind my writing, was our life, right? Now, we know that mathematically circles don't have an endpoint and a starting point, but let's just say that this is where your life starts, this is where your life ends, just for this exercise. Did you know that mathematically circles have an infinite amount of points and an infinite amount of angles? Or in other words, an infinite amount of chapters. And in the middle, we have God. Point one, the abuse I endured when I was a kid. Another point, my father walked out of us when I was in elementary school. Another point, I got kicked off the basketball team when I was in high school. Another point, I had to drop out of college. Another point, I was in an abusive relationship. Another point, I made a very bad investment. But the thing about circles is that for every point, there's an equal distant point on the other side. That's where God comes in. You know, what am I saying? Napoleon Hill once said, every adversity, every failure, every setback has a seed of equal or greater benefit. But how many of us know that we don't serve an equal God, we serve a great God?
Yes.
Zechariah 9:12, you prisoners of hope, even now I announce that I will restore twice as much to you. Isaiah 61:7, instead of your shame, you will receive a double portion. And instead of disgrace, you will rejoice in your inheritance, and you will inherit a double portion in your land. Everlasting joy will be yours. Job 42:10, and after Job had prayed, the Lord restored his fortunes and gave him twice as much as he had before. Your life was blessed with a finite number of pages, but an infinite number of chapters. And if you don't like the life that you're living, simply keep writing as many chapters as you need till your story is the one you want it to be. Another illustration I'm going to use is why we have such a hard time owning our story. Let's just say this square is our life and represents a piece of paper. It's something I like to do when I'm home. If you're watching online, if you can see it, you can do this with us right now. Let's say this square is our life. And let's say, I put a dot for every single major circumstance that happened to me or something I did to somebody else. That lie I made so I wouldn't get in trouble, but somebody else took the fall. The divorce. I went to prison. I got laid off. Car accident. I lost the house. Tornado came out of nowhere, took everything I had. I was abused. The church I went to mocked me and shunned me. What happens is we like to take ownership of the dots and not the entire page. If you notice, there's a lot of white space there. That space represents God's grace, blessings, healing, and restoration. It's time for us to stop trying to take ownership of just the dots and take ownership of our entire life. There's a quote that says, the beauty of life is not that only do you get to choose how do you interpret each chapter, but your interpretations write the next chapter. You can't control events in your life, but you can control the interpretation, so choose the story that serves you. Our own stories, our own dots, our own chapters can be our own coffin, our own classroom. There's a quote that says, if you look for the light, you'll often find it, but if you look for the darkness, that's all you ever see. So how do we own our story, Malachi? Well, there's multiple ways, but one way is you have to move. Everyone say with me, move. Move. As humans, we're bounded by time. Some of us like comic books and superheroes, but we can't time travel. Can't go in the future, can't go in the past. We're bounded by time. However, God is not bounded by time. But sometimes we want to go in the past and go back because it's comfortable. or we feel like we can't go forward because of our past. We feel like we've made too many mistakes. Let me just stay right here and suffer the rest of my life in this chapter. Pastor Joel says in this way, don't stay where God was, go where God is. God is ahead of you writing future chapters in your life, and you can't hope to make progress where you're not taking action, because faith without works is dead. There's a quote that says, you have more to lose by believing that the impossible could actually be possible in your life. You have more to lose by not believing that the impossible could actually be possible in your life. We see this with the woman in the blood, in the issue of blood in the Bible. And for 12 years, in Mark chapter 5, for 12 years she had this issue. She was seeing doctors, reports weren't coming well. She basically exhausted all her money in modern terms. And in fact, she actually got worse. But one day, she had the opportunity to take back ownership of her life. She saw a person named Jesus who had the power to heal her. However, there was a crowd between her and Jesus. And sometimes what happens is we can see the miracle on the other side, but we feel like we can't get past the crowd. You're walking through, doubt comes in. Another crowd pushes you. That's shame or regret. Or someone else pushes you. That's your own memories, your own past mistakes, your own faults. And we can't get to the center of the crowd. But this woman, on the other hand, said to herself, if I can just touch his garments, I will get well. We see in the rest of the story that she immediately touched and powered through the crowd and touched the hem of his garment. Didn't have to talk to him. Didn't even have to approach him directly. Just touched him, and immediately she was healed. Her blood was dried up, and she felt her body was healed of all her diseases. She had to move. We see this of the story of Elijah in 1 Kings. If you don't know the story, long story short, powerful prophet, made a great miraculous event. Things changed. Now he finds himself in a cave, fearful, afraid, and suicidal. At the bottom of his despair, God says to him, not once but twice, what are you doing here? What are you doing here, Elijah? What are you doing here, Eric? What are you doing here, Malachi? God doesn't want us to stay in the cave of discouragement and despair and pain. The quote says, don't let your present pain make you forget your future purpose. Way number 2, we have to shift from victim mentality to a victor mentality. There's a truth we need to grasp here. And my name is Malachi, I'm your friend. When you're not writing your story, no one is coming to pick up the pen for you. When you're not writing your story, no one is coming to pick up the pen for you. But the good news is that God will keep your book open. He's not done with you. And even when you feel like you've lost this pen, or you feel like you don't have the strength to continue, he's holding the book open. Let me share a story of my grandfather. Several years ago, he was diagnosed with cancer, caught very early on, no problem. However, some issues occurred in the surgery, and he suffered a stroke. To put this into context, my grandfather is a multi-state inducted rock and roll inductee for singing, and he was a lead worshiper at his church. Amen. However, from the stroke, he was practically left half paralyzed and lost the ability to speak and sing. However, everyone say, but God.
But God.
But God had other plans. Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. And unfortunately, that was not my grandfather's last chapter. Amen. Today, as you saw him walk in the room, he's alive and well. Amen. He can walk, still leading worship at his church, and he golfs with me on occasion from time to time. There's another story of another woman I know, and she was in a terrible car accident several years ago. And she was probably told that she would never be able to walk again, and in fact, the doctors wanted to amputate her leg. As you can see, that's not a car no more.
Wow.
From the collision. But Jeremiah 29:11 says, "For I know the plans I have for you," declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you, to plans to give you hope in the future. My mom did not believe this chapter of her story, so she stood firm, trusting in God's promises over her life. Against all odds, not only did she walk again, but she became a professional bodybuilder, winning multiple shows. Ladies and gentlemen, we can't allow our minds to become our own God. We cannot allow our own minds to become our own God. When you face obstacles, don't let limitations of your mind tell you what's possible. When you face obstacles, don't let your limitations of your mind tell you what's possible. Trust that God can turn things around and keep your story alive. Number 3, fight to focus. If I can get an extra microphone up here, please. I've mentioned this story before. If this is your first time at Freedom, thank you for joining us. I'll kind of give you a gist of it. When I was a kid, in my early teenage years, I was heavy into Animal Planet and Discovery Channel and nature and all those things. And one day I said, I'm going to plant a tree. So I went into the yard, found a twig. However, I decided to put it in the most impossible place it can grow. Put it right in the middle of my grandparents' sandbox. Day after day, every day, everyone say every day.
Every day.
Every day I nurtured it, I watered it, made moats around it, took care of it. But day after day, everyone say every day.
Every day.
People kept telling me, Malachi, it's not going to grow. Wasting your time here. Tree's not going to grow, Malachi. But one day, everyone say, one day.
One day.
I saw one leaf.
Wow.
Nehemiah 6:9 says, they were trying to frighten us, thinking their hands would get too weak for their work and it would not be completed. But I prayed, now God strengthen my hands. Just like when Nehemiah finished his work, as you can see today, of the tree, if you can put the tree up for us. That tree is not only the largest tree in the backyard, it's one of the largest trees in the neighborhood. And to give it a context of where this picture is taken, this picture, that fence is our neighbor's fence, and the picture is taken from across the street.
Wow.
That's how big this tree is. I want to leave out this quote. Train your mind to hear God's whispers, not the enemy's shouts. Train your mind to hear God's whispers, not the enemy's shouts. Now, today is special because we have one of my doubters at the time here in attendance. I still love her, though. We've had multiple conversations over the years, so I would like to invite up my grandmother just to share what she's learned from God about this tree.
So I'm Shar Handy, I'm the grandmother. Malachi and his little brother and my daughter moved to the East Coast when he was 4 years old and Michael was 6 years old. And so they started coming to visit in the summers. And first summer they came, he was 5 years old. And one day I'm looking at him from the house in the backyard, and he's bent over in the sandbox. And we cannot figure out what he's doing. And so that's when his mother and I go outside. And here's that little twig in the sand. And it's got like 5, 6 leaves on it. And he's got this little circle of rocks around it. And every day he's watering it. And I said to him, baby, that's not going to grow. First of all, it's in the sand, but the other thing we couldn't figure out is it was a twig from a maple tree, and there were no maple trees around us. Wow. So we're trying to tell him so that he won't be disappointed. It's not going to grow. That boy paid no attention to me. He didn't turn his head toward us, did he, Christine? He didn't turn around. He didn't nod his head. He didn't shake his head. We were totally absent in his presence. We did not exist. So we turned around and went back into the house. So they go back east. That fall, the leaves fall off of this little twig. Not more than this tall. The next spring, I'm out in the yard getting ready to plant my garden, and I happen to look at that twig, and by golly, if there weren't buds on it. And I called Christine, and I said, Christine, remember the twig? Yeah, there's buds on it. She said, shut the front door. And I said, well, I can, but there's still buds on it. There are buds on it. And those buds opened up. Wow. They came back for vacation. He's back out there straightening out the rocks, watering the little twig. Every summer. And pretty soon we got little branches on that twig. Pretty soon it's a little bush. Pretty soon it's a big bush. And my husband had built a platform over the tree, over the sandbox, and that bush reached that platform. So I started trimming the bush. And then I thought, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to start pulling the branches out from around the platform. And as he already showed you, that is the biggest tree in our yard and one of the biggest trees in our neighborhood. A couple of years ago, I went out in the backyard, and I've been praying for some things for a long time, like we all have. Yes. And I'm looking at this tree, and God said, do you remember that little boy when you were trying to tell him that tree's not going to grow? Yeah. What did he do? I said, he ignored me. Totally ignored me. God said he ignored the naysayers. I was a naysayer. And he said, do you know why? I said, why? He said, he had a vision. Yes. He had a vision of a tree. And he wasn't going to argue with anybody. He wasn't going to debate anybody. He wasn't going to try and convince anybody. He had a vision. And he said, you need to have a vision for what you're believing for. And don't listen to the naysayers. People are naysayers. Satan is a naysayer. I was the biggest naysayer. That's why we are told, take captive your thoughts. Yes. Renew your mind. Because I am my biggest naysayer. Moses had to keep the vision for 40 years. He was surrounded by naysayers. Joseph had to keep the vision of being a leader when he was a slave and when he was in prison. He was surrounded by naysayers. And God said, Shar, keep the vision. Don't listen to the naysayers. And I'm telling you, one day I'm going to wake up and I'm going to have my maple tree.
So good.
Ooh. All right, back to our regular scheduled programming. Way number 4, if we can get that up. This is the last one.
So good.
Sometimes we have to give God the pen.
Amen.
Sometimes you don't have the strength to write, or sometimes we've been writing a lot of stories, a lot of chapters that are just filled with heartache, pain, and tragedy. Thinking about Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, in his moment of his deepest agony, he was faced with the weight of the cross ahead of him. Yet his invulnerability, he surrendered to God's plan. When you see in Luke 22, verse 42, not my will, but yours be done. The very next verse it says, angels came and comforted him. What does that signify? God didn't leave him alone in the moment, and he won't leave us alone either. When we let go of the pen, God steps in, and he will give us what we need to keep writing.
Yes.
One prayer, just one, that's all it takes, can change the entire direction of your story. Me personally, suffered from alcoholism, suffered from depression. I lost my will to live, if you catch my drift. I was kicked out of my major in college. I had a below a 2.0 GPA. I was on academic probation, all while hiding this from my family and my friends. My life had hit rock bottom, and I had nothing left. I was in an abusive relationship on the abused side during this time. And it got so bad that one day I prayed to God one time, hands and knees, and I said, God, if you don't fix this, me and you, we're done. And I walked away. But just like in the prodigal son in Luke chapter 15, when the son came to his senses and he came back running to his father, the father jumped at him with open arms. And after my near-death experience with alcohol poisoning, I gave God the pen. And he began to rewrite my story. And today I stand before you, nearly 6 years sober. I stand before you a college graduate. I stand before you a master's graduate. I'm serving at Lakewood, one of the largest churches in the world. And I'm currently pursuing my doctorate degree as I plan to go full-time in ministry. Sometimes all it takes is a moment of surrender. That one prayer, that one act of faith can change what's written in your story. As I close, I just want y'all to ask yourselves, do you own your story? Are you owning your story? Are you owning your story? I'd like to remind you all again that your life was blessed with a finite number of pages, but an infinite number of chapters. And one bad chapter doesn't define nor end your story. I'd like to leave you all with this poem. It's a poem titled, A Letter to the Creator of the Universe. A man said to the creator of the universe, Sir, I exist. And the creator of the universe replied, the fact of your existence is not the question. The question is, what are you going to do with it? It's time to own your story. Thank you.